Hi, my name is Rebecca Gowland. I am the ED of Patriotic Millionaires International and here in the UK. And I wanted to start this provocation by asking the question, why is everyone so scared to invest their time, their voice, and their money into the fight for a fairer tax system? As a bit of background, Patriotic Millionaires is an organisation of millionaires focused on one mission, and that is the destabilising impact that economic inequality is having. And we do that through working on three pillars of the political economy. First and foremost, to make sure that there is fair and just representation in our political systems to prevent political capture, so that the very wealthiest don't get a greater say over our politics than ordinary people. Secondly, we look at pre-distributive measures. So that is making sure that all stakeholders are as valued as shareholders. And then thirdly, and for me and for us of primary importance right now, is redistribution. And the best way to redistribute with efficiency and with universal impact is through a tax system that more heavily taxes those with wealth than it currently does. Without this short and medium term practical intervention into our economy, we will never be able to deliver the just economies that we all want and that are fit for the future. So before we talk a bit about why are people so scared of this issue, let's look at the state of the world and the state of our country and how grossly unjust it is when it comes to who pays for us, who is supporting us, who is looking out for and looking after our shared interest. And the shocking fact is that it is the poorest and the middle class that are paying for us, for our country and for the economy. Income tax, value-added tax, national insurance contributions mean that the bottom 10% are paying twice the effective tax rate as the top 0.01% are. They're paying 44% effective tax rate. The top 0.01% of the UK population are paying 21%. And governments focus their tax policy predominantly on working consumption, the two areas that have most impact on working people and on poorer people. In the UK, 73% of the revenue that's raised comes from national insurance, comes from income taxes, and comes from consumption taxes. Taxes on capital, such as property, inheritance, shares, contribute 4% to our national revenue. So 4 pence in every pound comes from taxes on wealth. And in the last 2 decades, we've seen a significant shift in how tax policies benefit the richest and cost the rest of society. I'm not just talking about people who kind of abuse loopholes. I'm talking about how the system is designed. It's literally set up to have policies that benefit the very wealthiest. So over the last 2 decades, we've seen the top rate of taxes decrease, lowered, while simultaneously VAT increase, a tax that hits the poorest hardest, that has increased. If you take this year and the freezing of tax thresholds, that has dragged millions of people into higher tax brackets, all while wealth is just simply not touched. And effectively, that's an extra £25 billion a year of a tax hike on the working people in this country by 2027, 2028. Not only that, post-financial crisis, there have been swinging cuts to our shared services. I'm not just talking about welfare provision. There have been real terms cuts to our police forces, to our NHS, to our schools, to our courts of law, to our councils who are responsible for looking after our local communities. So much so to the fact that in 2019, the UN asserted that 1 in 5 people in the UK are living in poverty. That was before COVID. And since then, we've watched rising food costs, rising energy costs, rising house prices, rising rents, rising interest rates, all affecting the poorest and the middle classes in this country. And simultaneously, by 2023, the UK is now home to 171 billionaires, whereas in 2010, there were only 29. So while the Spirit Level came out in 2009 and systematically showed us how inequality costs us all, and it's in a state of disrepair in this country, we had a chance to learn from that. But we've spent the last 2 decades only further watching the intensification of it. And unless we take the redistribution bull by the horns right now, that will worsen again. No country can thrive while the majority of its people are on their knees. So why is tax not seen as an answer to this? Why is it so maligned? And it really is. It's an issue that is questioned, is maligned more than any other that I've ever worked on. And I guess there's a long history to that, in part because the tax collector has been a figure of hate for thousands of years. Maybe at points through history, tax has represented greed, it's represented corruption, it's represented avarice. Maybe that's what it was. Maybe that's what the tax collectors were. But that is certainly not what they are now. To me, tax represents an opportunity. It is the backbone of the social contract. It is our shared investment in the commons. And it is the greatest collaboration in a national and sometimes an international project that exists. It's a chance at investment in the country and in the world that we want. And that's really why the group is called Patriotic Millionaires. To oppose that, so for wealth to try and minimize the tax that is paid, is incredibly short-termist. Prioritizing what is in your pocket today is going to have such a huge impact on the lives of your children in a decade. And the scales have been heavily weighted in that favor, heavily weighted against the fair distribution of the tax take. The public narrative has always been that tax is a burden, taxes are bad, rather than something to be celebrated, something to commit to together, something to be proud of. Weighted in such a way that there was a study recently that came out from the Good Ancestor movement, and it reflected the bias against taxes from the wealth advisory profession itself. And that bias was shown to be so intense that it was reported as ethically compromised by wealth advisors themselves. When it's not maligned, we're told that it's not effective. We're told that philanthropy can do it better. But in 2023, only £12 billion were raised and given to charity through the course of that whole year and across the entirety of the UK population, so including poorer people as well as the wealthiest. A wealth tax of 1 to 2% on people with £10 million or more, so that's just 20,000 people in this country, could raise £22 billion every year. That is inequality busting revenue, and it is revenue that could be put to good use for our shared public services. It's also effective and it's mandatory. All of those people within that bracket would have to pay it. It's a fair way of making sure that everyone is contributing. So I think it's time for collaboration, and I think it's time for investment in this work. We have to collaborate to make sure that tax is taken seriously as a solution to economic inequality. Political representatives, civil society, wealth holders, public, together, we need to make sure the right people are investing in our shared needs. And we need to make sure we're doing that because we are fighting a political battle that needs support, and it needs support from people with economic influence, because our politics has been and is being captured by people with a certain brand of economic influence. We recently ran a series of polls, one question to 3 groups. The question was, how much do you support the introduction of a net wealth tax for people with 10 million or more? And we asked the general public for their answer. The richest 6% of the UK population, so people with $1 million or more in investable assets. And we asked MPs. Now, the response to that went, support from the general public was 77% in favour of the introduction of net wealth tax. From the richest 6% of the UK population, 68% of them are in favour of the introduction of a net wealth tax. And most surprisingly, we polled people with 10 million and more, 66% of them are in favour of the introduction of a tax on themselves. When we looked at MPs, that support fell to 39%. Now, that was hugely affected by a very, very low level of support from Conservative MPs, but it does go to show the chasm between our political representatives and what everyone else wants. And if everyone else wants it, what is stopping us? What is in our way? What is stopping people from getting more involved? What are people scared of? What are you scared of? Now, the new economy movement is very small, and it's often focused on cerebral ideas of what a future might look like, without making an investment in what must actually happen, what we must actually do to get us there. And if we don't address redistribution, if we don't address taxes now, we're not going to be able to address the existential crises that we all care about, because people can't think about climate change if they're having to think about whether or not they can feed their children. If we want to build a better future for tomorrow, we have to pick up today's political hot potatoes. And sometimes it does feel as if it's taken people an awfully long time, including funders, to get there, to recognise that. And I wonder why. I wonder what the reason is for this fear. Why does it seem so scary? Perhaps it's that we feel that the job is too big, or it's too overwhelming, that the problem is insurmountable, that the narrative is too strong, and that's why we don't have everybody speaking up for tax justice. But I would say to that the road to change takes everyone's voice to contribute, and it can only happen if people decide to engage. Perhaps you're scared of people who pretend to know more than you do about it, saying that changes to the tax system like that will ruin the economy. But to those people, I would say, look at our economy now and tell me that it is not ruined. Tell the person who is losing their house because they can no longer afford their mortgage repayments that our economy is not ruined. Perhaps the fear of not wanting to talk about taxes is based on people thinking they're going to lose control of their money. I would say to those people that think about the vast change that is possible if we have national funds to invest in what is actually required to get our country, our shared projects, and our world back on track. Philanthropy can't do this by itself. It's sporadic, it's unpredictable. And while pots of money can make change happen, certainly short-term change, certainly small change, they can't transform at the scale that is required. Philanthropy can't support communities if structures remain in place that will extract that money from those communities immediately once they receive it. Then finally, perhaps it's the fact that you're scared, we're scared of the government wasting our money. But to that, I would say that tax is not the problem there. The problem really is that we need to think about our roles as voters, and we need to get active, because tax is the backbone of democracy. And if you elect not to pay it, or if you elect to minimize it and to remove yourself from that system, then you are electing to say that you're outside of the process of running our country. Instead, I think that wealth holders should be investing in our country by paying higher taxes and voting for a different government if you don't like how it's spent. So, to close up, I would like to say that change is most definitely coming. It is inevitable. And I am hopeful that the right kind of change on this is coming. I really hope that you feel that too. I believe that there is a significant shift in how people perceive taxation. And that's in large part because of the work that is being done right now. If you look at organisations like Tax Justice UK, they are building an infrastructure around a tax movement that is strong, that is vibrant, that is inspiring. If you look at Patriotic Millionaires in the UK, we are using the voice of wealth to support that movement, whether that be through articles in Spears or in the Telegraph or in the Times this week. We are using that to influence the media narrative, and we are using that to directly influence politicians to change policy on this issue. And we have the Good Ancestor movement, providing practical learning, advice and support against a wealth industry that is biased against taxes. There is so much happening within these organisations and with other organisations, and we want you to be involved with what we're doing. We need your support. We all need support on this issue. I feel really, really proud of the work of the New Economy movement. I feel really proud to be talking about taxing the super rich, and our very wealthy members feel really proud to be talking about that too. I feel really proud about my own paycheck when I see taxes are being taken. And I really hope that you can use this to think about what might be preventing you or your organisation from investing more of yourself in this movement, what's stopping you from being tax proud. Because I feel that it is time to overcome that, and it really is time to get to work.